So welcome. Good to see each and every one of you again today. Today we're here to talk about Ayurveda. And Ayurveda and yoga go side by side. They're sisters, sister sciences. Yoga is the spiritual practice. It's the practice that brings us to that state of self-awakening or toward that state of self-awakening. It is our daily ritual that we follow for health and wellness in body, mind, and spirit, for connection and for spiritual unity. And that sounds really lovely, but we are all alive in a human world. We all have schedules to follow. We have jobs, 9 to 5 or more. We have families and things that have to get taken care of. So how do we find time for the spiritual practice, for the sadhana? Ayurveda. Ayurveda, the science of life, the science of living. It is the organizing principle for our day-to-day life so that we remain healthy in our habitual behaviors and so that we have an understanding of the space necessary for our spiritual practices as well as our day-to-day scheduled practices. So Ayurveda is really vast. It's a very vast series of practices and understandings of being alive. And you can focus on any one of them or several of them. So for example, Ayurveda deals with digestion and diet. It also deals with your day-to-day schedule. It also deals with astronomy and astrology. It also deals with tastes and the types of prana that you bring in with regard to your particular dosha. And if you're not familiar with that word, we'll go over that in a second. Ayurveda works with body type, mind type, and spiritual type. Because yes, there are different spiritual types. Ayurveda touches on everything. It tells a married couple appropriate rituals for becoming pregnant, having a pregnancy, giving birth to a child, bringing that child into the world, and supporting the raising of that child. There's nothing that Ayurveda doesn't cover. Ayurveda also covers rituals for dying, rituals for being born, rituals for living, and rituals for dying. Everything in between. Ayurveda is thousands of years old. It is similar to the Vedas in that humans didn't make this stuff up according to the tradition. It was handed down from divinity. It's a divine science, meaning that it's not of a human mind. It's of the mind of the cosmos or that universal consciousness, whatever you want to call that. And it was originally handed down by Brahma. Brahma, the creator of the Trideva. Do you remember that from last time? The Trideva are the three gods, the creator, the maintainer, and the destroyer. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Brahma is the creator, and he is, in many lineages, considered to be the source of Ayurvedic wisdom. And so he handed it down to someone who handed it down to someone who handed it down to several someones. And from there, it made its way through India into the modern day. And it has become a mainstay in health and wellness in India today. The father of Ayurveda is often referred to as an individual named Dhanvantari, and you have a picture of him in your handout. In one story, and there are many different stories about how Ayurveda came to be known among us, among people. One story has it that there was a battle between the asuras and the gods, and those would be kind of the demons and the gods, and they were churning the ocean at some point because they were trying to undo a harm that had been done. And from the churning of the ocean, Dhanvantari rose from the bottom of the ocean, and in one of his hands he was holding a jar of medicine. And from that he gave the wisdom about medicine and about healing to people. Another story is that Indra, the god of war, came back from a meeting with Brahma with this knowledge in his mind because Brahma gifted it to him. And he gave it to a number of individuals, and then they had a scholarly discussion, kind of like a dissertation presentation, where each student got up and talked about a different aspect of Ayurveda. And one person from each category was named the best, the master of that. And there are several categories in Ayurveda. We have the category of surgery. We have the category of geriatric science. We have the category of childbirth and pregnancy. We have the category of poisons and how to deal with toxins. So there are several different categories. The one category that we practice most today is the category covered in the Charaka Samhita, which is the hymn of Charaka. And that would be kind of similar to your internal medicine today. How to live on a day-to-day basis, how to eat your food, what time you should wake up in the morning, what time you should go to sleep, your basic study of being healthy while living. Does that make sense? So that book is called the Charaka Samhita, and it is fairly easy to acquire a copy of it. The copy that I have has, I believe it's 6 or 7 volumes to it. It's an interesting read. There are some things in there, for example, that might seem a little dated or a little confusing. One of the things that it's suggested in there is that if you are experiencing malnutrition, you should drink a small amount of your first morning urine, because the first morning urine is the pre-digested food from your previous day. So it's already ready to be uptaken. It's already ready to be integrated into the body. And most people kind of find that a little off-putting, yeah? But if you think about it, what are you eating when you're eating some foods, when you cook them? You're eating pre-digested food because it's been cooked, it's been malted, it's been prepared for easier digestion. But because we're looking at it and saying, well, but that's urine, it came out of my body, you know, we look at it as waste, but it's actually not waste as in toxic. It's unutilized nutrients that your body, for whatever reason, wasn't able to take into its structure, and so eliminated it so that there wouldn't be too much accumulation. And there are people, believe it or not, who they go to the Ayurvedic doctor, who is called a Vaidya, and the Vaidya will say to them as part of their protocol, you need to take this amount of your morning urine, cannot be your afternoon urine or your evening, it has to be the first urine of the morning, and that is a way to build vitality, to address greater digestive processes in the body. Very interesting, right? Yeah. Another thing that they say in the Charaka Samhita are that if it's a very cold day or a very cold time in winter and temperatures are plunging, then a man who is cold due to fragility should sleep with a large-breasted woman. What? Isn't that sexist? And what does that mean? You know, what are they telling you there? Well, what they're actually saying, if you read between the lines, and I suppose that in the past, maybe their lines were a little different than ours, they're saying that there are certain body types that hold warmth more than other body types. And we're going to talk in a few moments about what the body types are. But the body type of Kapha, which would be an individual who has more meat on their bones, more substance on their bones, they have larger bones, they have a greater layer of fat on their body, they have a greater immune system, and they have a tendency to be warm, you know, versus someone who has no meat on their bones, someone who has no fat layer on their body, and who is cold all the time. So we look at that and initially we say, well, that kind of sounds like antiquated information when you take the initial reading of it. But then you got to think about what they're saying. And what they're saying is your body type is going to define for you how healthy you are given the season of the year, what you can tolerate. Yeah. So we're going to start today by going over the doshas. We're going to talk about what doshas are and how to define them for ourselves. And then the second part, we're going to go a little bit deeper into taste, the quality of taste, and how your diet impacts your dosha and why, how it can balance you or bring you to a point of imbalance, and even what's called a vitiated condition, which is the condition of disease. And then the third part of today, we're going to talk about remedy. We're going to talk about how basic lifestyle changes can really support balancing the elements of your body. They can really support balancing your doshas, and how your yoga practice can be organized such that it supports your particular dosha, your particular constitution. Okay? So the first thing to understand is that in Ayurveda, the human being is alive for the sole purpose of self-realization. That's why we're here. We're here to resolve karma. We're here to self-realize, to come to understand the truth of who we really are. And that truth can be called by many things. It can be called oneness. It can be called divine love. It can be called spiritually awakened, enlightened, compassionate being. But that's what we're here for. Everything that we are here for, everything we experience while we are here, is meant to propel us on that path of finding out who we really are. So when we look at Ayurveda, we see that Ayurveda follows the science of Samkhya Yoga. Now, last time we talked a little bit about the Samkhya science as the creation of the universe and where humans came from. So in Samkhya Yoga, we have initially this void, this space, and there's not much happening there. So think of the entirety of the universe, of all universes everywhere, simply being a space. There's nothing there. There's no planets, there's no stars, there's nothing. There's only two potentialities, two potentials. There's the potential for continued stillness, and there's the potential for movement. According to some traditions, the potential for stillness is divine masculine. The potential for stillness is associated with the masculine, not the man, but the masculine, which is a quality of energy that includes stability. The potential for movement is associated with the divine feminine. It is less stable and more fluctuating than stillness. And these two potentialities are called Purusha and Prakriti. So within this void exists these two potentials. And nobody knows why, but something happened, And there was a disturbance. And what was still began to move. And in that movement, through that movement, and because of that movement, there was what in modern science we could refer to as something along the lines of the Big Bang. And suddenly particles began to move and things began to shift and accumulate into what would become planets, stars, suns, moons, and everything that is in the universe now. And that dynamic, that movement, that shifting set in motion what we have come to understand as the universe today. So we have the void, we have Purusha, we have Prakriti. And as this universe is being developed, something emerges called the Buddhi. Buddhi, the Buddhi. And that is the divine intellect. From the divine intellect emerges Ahamkara. Ahamkara is the divine ego. From the divine ego emerges Manas, which is the mind. From the mind emerges the qualities of the mind and the qualities of the material world. From those qualities emerge the use or the interaction with those qualities through the faculties, the hands, the feet, the eyes. And so when we look at the Samkhya theory of creation, what we're looking at is that we began integrated into the source of all things, and step by step, we became separated, or what we perceive as separated. We went from being greatly integrated to being individuated. If you look at evolutionary theory in science today, it says something similar but much different. It says that we started off as a single cell organism, and that single cell organism became complicated. Only in evolutionary science, they're talking about a single cell organism that existed in a swamp somewhere, and they don't look at that as divinity. They look at it as we climbed up the evolutionary ladder to become the complicated, self-aware beings that we are. Where in Ayurveda, it can be said that we actually moved from a state of pure awareness to a state of lack of awareness. And our purpose here in this life is to regain awareness, to regain that which has been forgotten or lost. That make sense? Yeah. So another way to look at it is to say that this first level of awareness, this buddhai, is kind of like waking up in the morning and realizing, I'm here. I am. The next level, the ahamkara, the divine ego, is saying, what am I? The next level is the discovery process. All the elements combine in a multitude of complicated ways to formulate processes that answer that inquiry. What am I? And then we manifest into a world based in opposites. Based in day and night, dark and light, good and bad, sweet and sour. And because in our heart of hearts, our spiritual impulse is to answer that question, what am I? We're drawn to these things, these essences, to answer that question. Our relationship with the sun, our relationship with the moon, our relationship with water, fire, air, and space, our relationship with food, our relationship with spiritual practices, our relationship with each other. They all can help us define or discover, explore who we really are. But if we become lost because of attachment, I like sweet, I don't like sour, therefore I'm never going to explore the sour, I'm just going to become repulsed by it, then that journey of self-discovery becomes challenged. Does that make sense? Yeah? It becomes challenged and we lose spiritual sight of what our goal is, which is to remember who we really are. So that is one perspective of the evolutionary theory or the creation theory about why we're here and what we're doing here. And there are people who talk about that a little bit differently also. There are people who talk about that a little bit differently. But I think that across the board, no matter who you speak to, when you're talking about the creation of the human being, to put it very simply, we could say that at some point, we remembered something that we have since forgotten. We knew something about ourselves. The moment we were born, we were innocent, we were sweet, we were without judgment. The only thing we really wanted was to be nourished. And then we were named. And from the moment we were named, expectations were placed upon us. We began to have experiences. Those experiences either maintained our balance or took us out of balance. And ever since then, we've been struggling to get back to balance. We've been struggling to find out who we really are in this life. What our meaning is, what our purpose is. How to feel well consistently. How to feel useful in society. For some, how to know God. For others, just how to get up out of bed in the morning and feel okay. Ayurveda covers all of it. So we have 5 elements. Ayurveda is based on an elemental theory. The 5 elements. We have earth, water, fire, air, and space. Everything is made up of these elements. Doesn't matter what it is. You're made up of them. I'm made up of them. This building is made up of them. The snow. What has more water, this floor or the snow?
Snow.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. But when we talk about the elemental theory in Ayurveda, are we talking about that kind of water? Not really. No, we're talking about the qualities that that water carries. So what are some of the qualities that water carries?
Fluidity.
Fluidity, absolutely. It moves, right? But it is not responsible for the movement, but it is movable. Yeah? What else? Is it warm or cold? When you jump in the ocean, is it warm or cold?
It's cold.
It's cold, yeah, absolutely. And is it dense or is it not dense?
Dense.
It's in comparison. It depends on what you're comparing it to. It's less dense than earth, but it's more dense than air, right? So it's on that trajectory of denseness. And is it sticky or clear? Clear, absolutely. Now let's look at this floor. This floor is made of wood, which in some traditions is also one of the elements. It would replace the element earth. What are some of the qualities of this floor if you consider that it is mostly earthen?
It's hard.
It's hard.
It's unyielding.
It's unyielding. It's strong. Stable. So it's not clear. Is it cold or warm? It's warmer than water, but it's not exactly warm. Earth is still considered to be cold. If you think about going out even on a hot day and putting your feet in the ground, is the earth cool? That's why we do that, right? That's why people dug like refrigerators into the ground in olden times to store their food, was because it was cooler. So it's not cold like water, but it's also not warm or hot like fire. It's kind of in the middle, right? Yeah. What's more stable, water or earth? Earth, absolutely. What's more stable, earth or fire? Earth. What's more mobile, water or fire?
Water.
Fire. Why?
It can bounce out of any container.
It can bounce out of any container. Why?
You can create it anywhere.
You can create it anywhere. Why? What is its component that makes it more mobile than water? What does it have more of, that water? Air. Exactly. It has more air than water. So you see, when we talk about the elements, we're going from less subtle to more subtle. So earth, water, fire. Fire is very subtle in comparison to earth and water. Yeah? And it's also more mobile than earth and water because it has more air in it, because air is actually the next element. And then the 5th element is space, or the ethers, which is a little bit challenging to understand. But if you think about the inside of your body, you are made up of cells, cellular structure, and there's a space in between the cells where there's nothing. That would be like the ethers. That would be the type of space that we're talking about, the space where there is nothing. The only one of the 5 elements that's mobile is air. That's the only one that's mobile. There's complete stillness in space. And fire, water, and earth don't move except for the influence of air. Right? The tides don't happen. The earth doesn't shift. And the fire doesn't waver. As a matter of fact, the fire won't even ignite if there's not just enough air to feed it. So air is the prime mover. Air is the prime mover. Now you look at these elements and we say, well, how do we understand ourselves in light of those elements? Well, the ancient practitioners of Ayurveda, the rishis, the saints, the sages, the teachers of old time said, we can categorize them into pairs. And the pairs will take on qualities. And those qualities, some people will hold certain ones, other people will have more of others. And so we can look at people and we can say, what are the qualities that this individual has? And we can say, then they fit into this category. So if you open up your handout, it's called the 20 gunas. So say after me, repeat after me. Guru Manda,
Guru Manda,
Hima Shnigda,
Himashniga,
Shlakshna Sandra,
Shlakshna Sandra,
Mridu Stiraha,
Vidu Sviraha,
Gunaha,
Gunaha,
Sasukshma,
Sushukma,
Vishadha,
Vishada,
Vimshati,
Vimshati,
Sa,
Sa,
Viparya,
Viparya,
Yaha.
Yaha.
This is from another one of the Ayurvedic texts called the Ashtanga Hridayam Sutrashtanam. And this is called the 20 gunas, or the 20 qualities that are associated with the elements and with the doshas. Guru Manda Hima Shnigda Shlakshna Sandra Mridu Stiraha Gunaha Sasukshma Vishada Vimshatihi Saviparyayaha. Heavy, slow, cool, unctuous, smooth, dense, soft, and stable. These qualities, along with the subtle and clear and their opposites, comprise the 20 qualities. So everything in the world, in the universe, has some combination of qualities. And these qualities originate in the elements. Heavy is Guru, Manda is slow or dull, Hima, Shita is also called, is cold, Shnigda, also called Sneha, is oily, Slakshna is smooth, Sandra is dense, thick or solid, Mridu is soft, Sthira is static or stable, Stula is gross or big, and then Pichila is slimy, cloudy, or sticky. And then each one of those has an opposite guna. And the opposite to Guru is Laghu, that means light in weight. And then the opposite of Manda, or slow, is Tikshna, which is sharp or penetrating. The opposite of oily, Shnigda, is hot, Ushna. The opposite of cold, Hima, is hot, Ushna. The opposite of oily is dry, Ruksha. The opposite of smooth, Slakshna, is rough, Kara. The opposite of dense, thick or solid, is liquid, which in Sanskrit is Drava. The opposite of soft, Mridu, is hard, Katina. The opposite of static or stable, Stira, is mobile or unstable, which is called Chala. The opposite of gross, Stula, is subtle, Sukshma. And the opposite of slimy, cloudy, or sticky is clear, as in non-slimy, and that's Vishada. Now, in Ayurveda, we have a saying, like increases like, opposites decrease. So if you are feeling cold outside today, and you go out there without your jacket on, what do you think you'll do? Will you stay out there very long? You'll head back inside to get your coat. Because on an intuitive level, you understand that cold plus cold equals more cold. And more cold, it does not bring balance to your body. So you will do something intuitively to counter the cold. Like put a jacket on, put socks on, turn the heat up. So one of the basic tenets in yoga, in Ayurveda rather, that we follow, and in yoga, is that if you're doing too much of one thing and it's causing an imbalance in your being, then you will shift and do its opposite in order to bring about or reacquire balance. So let's go back to the elements for a few moments and say we're going to take these elements and we're going to partner them in ways that define doshas. So go back toward the front of your handout. The tri-dosha the three doshas, the three constitutions, the three ways that we can see our physical, mental, emotional being. The first takes that we'll talk about is kapha. Kapha is a combination of earth and water. A combination of earth and water. Some of the most amazing homes and structures have been built because of the combination of earth and water, have they not? Yeah. So that tells us right there that that combination does have a tendency to be stable and strong. Strong enough that we can actually live in one for years if we were to take those qualities, create bricks or pallets out of them and create a structure. So an individual whose constitution carries predominantly the qualities of earth and water together as kapha tends to have a strong body, a strong being. They tend to be very stable, difficult to move. Yep. So they physically, and don't jump into the tendency to stereotype this, because we have to always think about what is balanced and what is not balanced. When we're looking at someone who has a predominantly kapha constitution, what we're going to see is that they have a thicker body. They're stronger in comparison to the other two. They have more vitality. They can run longer distances. They can lift heavier weights. Once they get moving, they can go for longer periods of time. They have greater stamina. They don't tend to get sick very often in comparison to the other two doshas that we're going to talk about, because they also have a very vital immune system. Their immune system is much stronger than the other two. When they're balanced, they're also the nurturers. They have strong love and strong compassion, strong loyalty. So simplified conversation about this, but generally speaking, you could say that your kapha individual who is balanced is strong, sustainable, loyal, nurturing, loving, and pretty much the person that you would want as your BFF, your best friend forever, right? Because they'll never leave your side. They'll never leave your side. They're always there. If you're not feeling well, they've got you back. They've got you covered. If you need something, they're there for you. You know, they're the ones that give the best hugs. They're the ones that listen without talking. They're the ones who are dependable. And they have a tendency to be selfless. They have a tendency to look out for you before looking out for themselves. That's the ideal balance. That's what comes forth from their particular constitutional mix when they're balanced. But when kapha is not balanced, then what is water and mud? I mean, water and earth. I just gave the answer. It's like mud, right? It's like mud. What is mud? How is that?
Sluggish.
Sluggish. What else? What other qualities might it have? So let's say that you're walking through a field and all of a sudden you walk into a mud pit. You didn't know it was there, but your foot sinks right down into that mud. Is it easy to move? No, you're stuck, right? So one of the primary symptoms of imbalance in kapha is a sense of stuckness. A sense of not being able to move forward, backward, or side to side. A sense of not being able to get out of some type of a pattern. That is a tendency when kapha is out of balance. Additionally, kapha is already dense, but when kapha is out of balance, that density may continue to increase, and they become more dense. So a kapha may have a tendency to weight gain in a way that is not healthy, in a way that takes them further out of balance. Mentally, emotionally, we have particular gunas, they're called maha gunas, that really do illustrate the qualities that the mind carries. Kapha is more a physical, but it is oftentimes associated with the mind as well. even though ideally that's not necessarily the best way to use it. We would want to say that the mind was tamasic and the body is kapic. But the tamasicness of the mind and tamas is not balanced, right? Would be that the mind is sluggish, stuck in its place, not open to new ideas, vengeful, holding grudges, because that's when you're stuck, you're holding on to things. Love becomes obsessive, and the individual suffers greatly as a result. So kapha, when kapha is balanced, when an individual who has predominantly a kapha constitution, the other two are still present, they have to be, but kapha is what is the dominant dosha. Balanced, they're nurturing, they're strong, they're healthy, they're vital, they have thick hair, dark eyes, big eyes, great skin. Their skin has a tendency to be toned all the way through. They don't have a lot of modeling, like some of us have freckles and things like that. Kapha doesn't tend to have those. They're very health, they're the epitome of just vibrancy. But then when they're a little out of balance or a lot out of balance, those tendencies kind of go out the window a little bit. They become extreme, so that the health becomes unhealthy, the stability becomes stubbornness, the nurturance becomes obsessiveness, and the individual suffers. The home of kapha in the body is the lungs. The lungs. Why? Because kapha's qualities are, let's look at the list. Heavy, slow, or dull, cold in comparison to pitta, dense, static, gross or big, slimy, cloudy, or sticky. It's not light, it's not sharp, it's not hot, it's not dry, it's not rough. It's not really liquid either, although it's more liquid than, fire or air or space. It is hard. It's not so mobile, and it's not subtle, and it's not clear. The one that we want to go to there is sticky. Sticky. What's sticky about the lungs? Phlegm. And it's unctuous too, is it not? And it's sometimes white or whitish green in color. It's a very kapha substance, phlegm. So when kapha is out of balance, we may also see lung issues. A lot of lung issues with production, right? So that when they cough, they're producing phlegm. So the lungs are considered home of kapha. When you get the flu and you've got that productive cough for 2 weeks later, you have a kapha imbalance. When you have the flu and you have 102 fever, you have a pitta imbalance. When you have the flu and you're not sure where you are because you're delirious, you have a vata imbalance. Yeah. So now the next one that we'll talk about is pitta. Pitta is the combination of fire and water. So what's denser, pitta or kapha? Kapha. Kapha is denser than pitta. Pitta, the combination of fire and water, is really interesting because those two things seem to be diametrically opposed to one another, right? If you wanted to put a fire out, what would you do? Besides kick sand on it, you douse it with water. So that right there is telling us that anyone who has a dominant pitta constitution needs to be very mindful about how these elements are relating to each other in their bodies and minds. Because they can very easily swing from balanced to imbalanced. Potentially a little bit easier than kapha, who is more stable. A healthy pitta individual, thinking that they have the elements of fire and water dominant, what types of qualities or traits would you expect to see in them? What do you think? Passion, absolutely. Ignited passion, right? This is where some of these phrases like intuitively come from. Their passion's been ignited. That's so very pitta. They see straight ahead. They see with clarity. I want that. And that's their passion. is that they will then go to great extremes and put themselves through great rigors in order to accomplish that. So what else might we say about Pitta? That one of their elements is fire. What else would you expect?
Tendency towards anger.
A tendency toward anger when they're out of balance. Yeah, absolutely. A tendency to take things passionately. Yes, they're your activists, actually, very much so. A lot of people who are activists have a very strong Pitta influence because that's the passion of it all. A person who has fire and water combination as their dominant elements, they're sharp, right? They're sharp like fire. They're clear. They are clear-sighted when they're balanced. They're ambitious. They're competitive in a healthful way. And there is healthy competition, right? They push a little more. They're structured. They're logical. They're your project leaders. They're people who like to have the tasks listed out for them and then don't vary from that list. You should do things in the order that they're written, and everything should be done so specifically so as to achieve the goal. So they're very goal-oriented also. They have a tendency to burn the midnight oil, right? They have a tendency for red eyes. They have a tendency toward different color skin. So their skin would be what's called mottled. It might be light on their hands and darker on their arms. Or they suntan easy. They don't burn, or the burn only lasts for a short period of time. They have a tendency to get very dark in their skin, darker pigmentation. They do have a tendency toward red hair, toward freckles, and toward rashes. Because rashes and acne are the eruption of fire on the skin. They have a tendency towards strong digestion, but not quite as strong as Kapha. Kapha's digestion is amazing. They can pretty much eat what they want to when they're balanced. Pitta likes spicy food, and they like a lot of it usually. How many of you like spicy food? Yeah, okay, there you go. So the darker hair, the darker eyes, the skin color is a little bit more on the mottled side. Yeah. And then we eat all this spicy food, and what happens is we'll have a reaction to that. Because your Pitta constitution, their enzymes in their body are already high. They have a lot of fiery activity in the body, and now they're adding to that more fire. And so their tendency will be toward acid indigestion, and into digestive issues that could include diarrhea. Why do you think just understanding the elements that Kapha is made up of predominantly are earth and water, and Pitta is predominantly made up of fire and water? What digestive issue is Pitta tended toward? Constipation or diarrhea?
Constipation.
Diarrhea because of the water.
Diarrhea because of the water and the fire, which melts. And diarrhea is hot. It tends to have an acidity to it. Yeah, where constipation is cold and dry. And that is more toward the Kapha in comparison to the Pitta. Yeah, definitely to the Vata, which we haven't talked about yet. Yeah. So your Pitta will tend to have diarrhea issues, or runny bowels, you might say. Yeah. Especially when they're not balanced. They'll tend to have hot eyes. Eyes that see with glaring sharpness. You ever see somebody like that? They look at you and it feels like their eyes just burned a hole through you. Guarantee that's the Pitta element working its way. Yeah, the Pitta dosha working. So because they look at things so sharply, their eyes get tired. So the eyes are considered to be one of the organs of Pitta. One of the organs. It's the faculty of Pitta. The liver is the other organ that's associated with Pitta. Because Pitta is very closely associated with blood, which is red, right? And fire is kind of an orangey color. So anything that is within those oranges and reds will tend to carry Pitta qualities with it. And if we look on the list of qualities that we talked about before, what we'll say is, according to the traditional list, oily, smooth, soft, light, sharp, penetrating, hot, liquid, and mobile, and subtle depending upon what you're comparing it to. Those are the qualities of the pitta. Those are the qualities that might get out of balance if lifestyle is not conducive to healthfulness. So let's just say that in an individual, mobility gets out of balance. In an individual who's predominantly pitta, who's driven, who's ambitious, who is goal-oriented, who is sharp-minded and sharp-tongued, mobility gets out of balance for them. How might that look in an individual? What might they be doing or acting or behaving in their life? Would they be someone who's sitting home watching the Harry Potter marathon? What would they be? They would be burning out. They would be going so much after the goal that they are out of control.
Is addiction more common than?
It depends on the kind of addiction that you're talking about. It's a great question, but it's a complicated question because there are different types of addiction. But yes, they have their own special kind. Absolutely. Yeah. And their addiction may have more to do with adrenaline, which is something that pushes you, it moves you, it gets you going, and they're very much, if you want to think of kind of a typical pitta individual, think of a sports person, a runner, a basketball player, football player, somebody who is really driven to sports and fitness and sometimes too much. Yeah, sometimes too much. So activity might also be their addiction, is that they do too much. Type A personality, absolutely pitta. Absolutely, yeah. So pitta is associated with the blood in the body. It's associated with the bile, with the enzymes in the body. And it's associated very strongly with the liver. So your liver is on the right side of your body, just above the waistline, under the rib cage. It's the largest organ in your body next to your skin. It spans from the outer edge of your waistline over past the center line. That's how big. It's a kind of a rough triangle, three-dimensional triangle. It's huge. And its purpose is to clean out the toxins in your bloodstream, to clean out all the toxins. And so when pitta, who tends to be driven to do more all the time, out of balance, their tendency might be to have pretty horrible sleep patterns, actually. I have a lot of pitta. And so the liver suffers as a result of that. And when the liver suffers, the liver becomes what's called hot. It's a hot organ because it deals with blood. And when that happens, the toxins that normally accumulate in the liver in order to be eliminated from the body have to go somewhere. So where do they go? Back into the body, or they get stuck in the liver. And that can cause things like fatty liver, cirrhosis of the liver from too much alcohol, which is another hot element, right? So alcohol has a heat to it. Too much alcohol in the body will harm the liver and cause cirrhosis of the liver. So different lifestyle choices can cause different issues in the body, depending upon what your primary constitution is. The liver is really actually an amazing organ, though, because it can regenerate itself. If you have as little as 1/4 to 1/3 of the liver in healthy condition, you can remove the rest of it and it will regenerate into a fully functional liver. It's pretty amazing. But the liver has a tendency to bleed out because it's basically blood. Just like an individual who is predominantly pitta has a tendency to burn out because they're predominantly work, doing, accomplishing. So one of the other tendencies that they have when they're out of balance is competitiveness. That's not healthy. Judgmentalism, criticism of self and others, expectations and attachments. Attachments of a different kind than kapha. Kapha's attachments are like, I want to stick to you. I want you to stick to me. Pitta attachments are more like, I'm going to get that. I'm going to. And they become very one-sided on things. They probably make really great lawyers too, because you want a lawyer who knows how to argue a side. And your Pittas are good arguers. So we'll move to Vata. Vata is the combination of air and space. Of the 5 elements, thinking about air and space as being the dominant factors, what are they missing? What is Vata missing?
Substance.
Substance, denseness, stability. Generally speaking, those things are not so present because they're not dominant. They're there to some degree, but not like they are for Kapha or Pitta. Air. What are some of the qualities of air and space? What do you think? Is it mobile?
Yes.
Oh yeah, very much so. Is it, we already said it's not dense. Is it heavy?
No.
No, not at all. Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes. Is it unctuous?
No.
No. Is it hot or cold?
Cold.
Cold. Yes, cold. Always cold. Always, always cold. So a Vata constitution has the following qualities. The Vata constitution is cold. Nothing else on that left side. Light, dry, rough, hard, mobile, and subtle. Think of a person who has a narrow frame, not a lot of muscle, not a lot of fat at all, who is potentially even maybe a little bit on the frail side. Their skin is very pale. Their hair is flyaway. Do you know somebody like that?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What else is it about their personalities? Explain them to me.
They're flighty and interested in non-substantive ideas, and they run late.
So it's hard for them to get organized? Yeah. Hard for them to focus? Are they always starting new projects?
Yeah.
Do they ever finish them?
Not often. Yeah.
Yeah, you said they're flighty, right? So it's funny that intuitively we choose these words. Flighty has to do with the air and has to do with space. So we intuitively choose words that actually describe the constitution of the individual. So when they're not balanced, those are all the qualities that you would expect to see. That they're scattered, that they're easily distracted, that they're highly mobile to the point where it's not healthy. They're always going somewhere else, and they don't particularly like to stay in one place for a long period of time. So if you have a friend who is now running off to the Amazon, and then after that they'll be going to Italy, and then after that they'll be going to some other great, amazing place that is anywhere but here, that's probably their Vata. That is driving them in that way, They always want to be on the move. They always want to go, 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 go. It's very hard for them to stay still.
Does it have to be a physical move, or could it be like not being present?
It can totally be not being present. Absolutely. So to be sitting here and being like, wow, the sky is blue. Oh, a leaf just fell over there. What'd they write on the board? Yeah, so when the mind wanders like that, right? That is a lot of movement in the mind, which, yes, we can associate that with Vata, but what we also want to associate it with is Raja, the Rajasic nature of the mind, the movement nature of the mind, right? So an individual who has these qualities of dryness, roughness, hardness, mobility, those individuals tend to be artistic. They tend to be highly creative. They see things that pass other people by right away. Like they look out and they see the geometrical patterns in nature. They see the astrology in the sky. They look for hidden meanings everywhere. They look for patterns. They're always looking, always. Not for the same reason that a Pitta is looking. A Pitta is looking through the forest to the tree to the apple on the branch 3.5 feet down from the top and thinking, how can I get that? The kapha looks at that and says, I'll just appreciate it from here. Pitta's scheming how to get it. Vata is looking at the forest and may not even see the apple, or sees the apple as an exquisite part of the forest that if you were to take it away from the forest, it wouldn't have the same meaning. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like their vision is different for each of them. Their purpose for looking is different for each of the constitutions, for each of the doshas. So your vata is always looking. They're always seeking inspiration. But the problem is they're never in one place long enough usually to find it. Yeah. So while they do have this beautiful tendency for artistry, and they have this beautiful tendency to be fit, they do. They have a tendency to be not too muscular, not too dense, to be very light in their body. Think of a ballerina, right? Just the right combination to have an exquisite flow of energy. But they become obsessed with lightness. And they lose too much of themselves. They lose too much weight, too much muscle, too much fat. They don't have enough to sustain themselves. And as a result, they become weak. As a result, when they become weak, they become fearful. They become anxious. They become overly concerned about everything. Because they have difficulty honing their attention to one thing. We look at fear in the doshas and we can say that there's 3 different kinds of fear. The fear of a kapha individual would be freeze, right? The fear of a kapha individual would be freeze. The fear of a pitta individual would be fight. The fear of a vata individual would be flight. I'm out of here. No confrontation. They can't deal with it. They don't want it. They love poetry, but they don't particularly care for communication. They love self-expression, but they don't particularly want to hear your opinion about it. They love being expressive, but they don't want feedback. Because they take all that so much to heart that it can actually hurt them to hear what you have to say. Even if what you're saying is kind, they probably won't believe you. They'll still look for the fault in the matter because that's how anxious and nervous and scared they are at the heart of the matter. We all know people like that. And even if right now you're saying, wow, I identify most with pitta. I identify most with kapha. I don't really identify with vata. There are still times in your life where you will identify with vata because it is present. And depending upon what your life is like in any given moment, what your food is like, what your physical activity is like, what your trauma is like in this life, vata may very well come to the forefront. And for some weird unknown reason, all of a sudden, you're like a rabbit, running over there, then over there, then over there, then over there, looking for a place to get away. Rabbit is very much vata. Rabbit is very much vata. Tiger is very much pitta. A tiger is very much pitta. And I suppose the elephant is very much kapha, but so is the dog. Like the beautiful dog that you have at home who's always at the door waiting for you. Who's stable and loyal and right there all the time. And you could use other animals to define. A mouse could be very much vata. Yeah? What could be pitta? What other animal could be like pitta? A fox could be very much like pitta. What could be very much like kapha? What do you think? Thoughts? What else?
I keep picturing a bear.
A bear? A bear could be very much, absolutely, especially the hibernating bear, right? Be very much like kapha. The bear in mating season, more pitta. Yeah. The bear At the end of mating season, before it starts preparing for hibernation, very vata. Because that's when they are at the lowest body weight. And that's when, if they don't get the sustenance that they need, they will actually become sick and they won't survive hibernation. Yeah. So even the bear has all three, right? What is the bird? Vata, Pitta, or Kapha predominantly? Vata, absolutely. What's the fish? Kapha, could be. Depends on the fish. Depends on the fish. Very good. All right, so questions so far about the doshas?
So you have one that predominates, but you can have combinations of other, and then ideally you're sort of, okay.
So the way that it works is this, and there are a few different schools of thought. The moment that you're born, that constitution that you're born with, which would be some relative relationship between all three. Let's say that you're born Vata and then Pitta Kapha. But Vata is your predominating dosha at birth. That's called your prakriti, your nature. That ideally in a balanced state is when you're most healthy. And there are ways to measure this, which we'll talk about. But then the doctor smacks you on the bottom and you cry. And from that moment of birth, environmental factors, internal factors, karmic factors, cosmic factors, all types of things begin to move you away from that prakriti, that originating dosha combination, and toward a state of imbalance. And you could see it as the rest of your life, you're looking for that balance again. You're looking for that moment of absolute balance. But the problem is you're probably never going to achieve it, at least not unless you really dedicate yourself to a lifestyle that is undistracted, undisturbed, and developed in spirituality. But you'll still strive, and you'll get close. You'll get very, very close. And sometimes you'll even feel moments of, this is exquisite health that I feel right now. But then something else will happen, you know. You'll get a cold, or someone will start an argument with you, or something, you know. So you have this prakriti. Now other people say that everybody's prakriti is the same, it's kapha. Everybody's prakriti, everybody's originating state is kapha. Because what does a baby look like? A baby, little unctuous baby, full of love and bubbles, you know? And that pure state of innocent bliss is in a way what we're seeking spiritually in this life. And most other things are either vata or pitta or kapha out of balance. And so we spend our lives seeking that state of nurturance, that state of absolute love. It doesn't really matter which school of thought you adhere to. What matters more is where we are now, today. What state are you in now? And that's called your vikriti. Your vikriti is your state of imbalance. What's leading the way right now? You can relate to the Sanskrit words of it, they're in your handout, or you can just say, am I feeling more or less balanced? And if I'm not feeling balanced, is it Vata, Pitta, or Kapha that's kind of motivating that sense of being out of balance or that sense of balance? And then going even beyond that and not getting stuck in the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, but going to this list and saying, you know, today I don't really feel very well, right? Do I feel heavy, slow, dull, cold, oily, smooth, dense, soft, static, gross, slimy, cloudy, sticky, too light in weight, sharp, penetrating, hot, dry, rough, liquid, hard, mobile, subtle, clear? What are my dominant qualities right now that are leading me to feel the way that I feel? The qualities are the key. And if I'm sitting here saying, well, you know, right now I feel kind of cloudy. We had a 12-hour sound healing session last night, and we had a full house. We had about over 20 people there, and Daniel he was playing all night long, such beautiful music, you know, and but you know what it's like when you're kind of up all night, but you're not really up all night. You know, you're kind of in and out of that sleep, and then the next day, what are you like? You're a little cloudy, you know? So if I know that I'm feeling cloudy, and I know that the sleep pattern last night contributed to that, this might seem really super obvious. What would you suggest I do tonight? Sleep, right? What would happen, do you think, if I stayed up again? How would I feel tomorrow? More or less cloudy? More. It's so obvious. It really is very simple on the surface of it. So like increases like, opposites decrease. Lack of sleep causes cloudiness. Sleep will resolve that to some degree. But what if I do go to sleep early tonight, but I wake up in the middle of the night? Insomnia, for some reason or another. Maybe because today I didn't eat well. And then even though I'm in bed for 8 hours, that's interrupted due to insomnia and not feeling completely well because the food that I ate today didn't agree with me. Then sleep is not necessarily the answer, or at least not the entire answer. So now the inquiry has to go deeper. What was it that I ate that may have contributed to the insomnia, which stopped me from getting the necessary sleep to wake up feeling sharp and alert and clear? This is where Ayurveda comes into a lifestyle. This is where Ayurveda becomes a lifestyle. Yeah. So before we end this first segment, I just also want to say that the home of Vata is in the intestines. It's in the colon, actually, which is where most of us, when we experience excess air in the body, that's where we'll experience it. Yeah. Right? So gas. The presence of gas in the body is the number one symptom for Vata being out of balance. And it doesn't have to be intestinal gas, it can be burping too, as long as there's no acidity to it. If it's acidic burping, then what is it? Pitta, correct. Dry skin, bleeding cuticles, also indications of a Vata imbalance. Dry eyes, also an indication. Constipation, big indication of a Vata imbalance, because constipation is dry bowels. Your intestines have this just beautiful intelligence that there should be a combination of all 5 elements such that you take food in through your mouth and water or liquids, and immediately the enzymes start to attack the food and start to pull the nutrients out. And as the food is going down through the esophagus, the tissues of the esophagus are drawing some of those nutrients into those tissues, some of the bioavailable nutrients at that level. Then the food goes down into the pit of the stomach where it's washed with enzymes, pitta-based enzymes. That particular pitta is called Jatara Agni. You don't have to remember that, but you'll hear it again later. And there, the food is broken down even more, and the nutrients become more bioavailable. From there, the food goes into the duodenum and into the small intestine, where the bulk of the nutrients are extracted, absorbed into the lining of the intestine, and then distributed throughout the body as they're needed, through a very complicated process that goes from gross to subtle. Everything in Ayurveda is gross to subtle. The grossest tissues of the body get fed first. The subtlest tissues of the body get fed last. The grossest tissues of the body are your blood and muscle. The subtlest tissues of your body are your reproductive tissues, sperm and ovum. If you have a lot of physical injuries, It may be that the nutrients from your food never quite make it to the subtlest of layers, at least not on a consistent basis, which can result in things like infertility issues, difficulty getting pregnant, challenges with the menstrual cycle, things along those lines. Then the food moves through the transverse intestine into the descending intestine and then out through the colon. And there's an exquisite blend of earth, water, fire, air, and space that allow this to happen like an intelligence with a wisdom. But if you have too little water and too much earth, then what was easily moved becomes like a brick and lodged in place until there's a wash of fluid or something happens to stimulate elimination. That's constipation. Not enough fluid, not enough fire, too much air, and too much earth. And when that happens, we feel dense, thick, sluggish, heavy, aggravated, angry, obsessed. All of the imbalanced qualities of kapha. Constipation is the number one issue in our society. Your bowel should be like a snake. It should be some version of tan or brown, depending upon what your constitution is. But it should be like a snake, and it should be anywhere from 1 foot to 18 inches long. For a larger person, maybe 2 feet long. And ideally, it should eliminate first thing in the morning without you even trying. When you have a bowel movement that looks like rocks, that's not a healthy bowel movement. That's constipation. Your bowel should be easily eliminated, and it should be pliable. It shouldn't be like you could break a window with it, you know? It's true. Yeah. So this beautiful digestive system and this eliminatory system necessitates a balance of these elements in order to function properly. And when those elements are out of whack, digestion is out of whack. And when digestion is out of whack, mind and emotions are out of whack also. Have you ever seen or met a chronically constipated person who was happy? No. They tend to have a little grimace on their face because they want to get rid of something, but they can't yet. So when we're dealing with digestive issues, we're also dealing with emotional issues. Yeah, it's true. It's true. And Ayurveda has all kinds of amazing things that you can do to bring the digestive tract back online and symmetrical with the cycle of the day and the night and the seasons. And we'll talk about that a little bit later today. But for now, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and continue. Wonderful. Thank you.